Hi, I'm C.C. Péan, and this is Reclaiming Your Health.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Happy Tuesday. So happy to see you all this evening. This is a very special Reclaiming Your Health. If you follow me on Facebook, you saw what I posted earlier about reclaiming your faith, reclaiming your connection, and reclaiming your health. And this evening, what we are going to be preparing is communion bread. I'm super excited about this because the audience for which this particular recipe will be shared is worldwide. And the reason it's worldwide is because on September 19th, the Reclamation Project will be hosting a worldwide communion, and it will be hosted and facilitated by Dr. Barry Black, who is the Senate chaplain here in the United States of America at the nation's capital. He's a very distinguished gentleman, preacher, very well known, and he's had that position for some time. And so everyone at the Reclamation Project is beyond honored and excited to have him lead out in what will be our first annual communion. And I was asked to come up with a recipe for communion bread that is something that they're ingredients that are available basically anywhere, very, very simple. So we have two different communion breads we're going to make. We have one that is gluten-free for those of you who have issues with gluten, and it's going to be made with almond flour. And then we have a more traditional communion bread that is made with whole wheat flour. And my niece was taste testing it a little while ago, and she said, "Oh, I love the taste of this." And it's so funny because when I think of traditional communion bread, I don't think of it as tasty, but it's definitely something that it's, it takes you back. It reminds you of those special days of having communion. The reason this means so much to me in particular is that COVID has taken us away from church and communing with one another. And I am actually an introvert. So I'm not really into crowds of people and things like that. But I have even found myself missing the fellowship. And one of the things that we do frequently, or at least 3 times a year at church, is we have communion. And that's when you come together, you eat the bread, you drink the grape juice, the ordinance of humility, when you wash each other's feet. It really is a time to be very introspective and get your life right. So I'm excited that the Reclamation Project has taken this on to bring back some sense of normalcy to our Christian walk and things that we have gotten used to doing and things that feed us spiritually. And so the first one we're going to work on tonight is the almond flour. And I want to talk a little bit about unleavened bread and why is unleavened bread used at communion. And I have a special guest tonight who I had to twist his arm, but he's gonna join with us in a little bit. But unleavened bread, I have kind of taken a crash course in understanding why we eat unleavened bread, and it is because yeast or risen bread is symbolic of sin. And when you have a rising agent or yeast or leavened bread, once it's part of the bread, you can no longer separate it. Once it's in there, it's in there. So that is why we eat unleavened bread, because it is pure bread that has not been defiled with this rising agent. And of course, as we're Judeo-Christian, it has a very it's a part of the Jewish culture, Passover, the matzah bread that they eat. Interestingly enough, as I was researching, I found out that quite often when they create their Passover bread, there is a little bit of honey or sweetness that is used to it. And as I think about it, that makes a lot of sense because our relationship with God is sweet. And it's something that we are chasing after. And you wouldn't be chasing after something that wasn't sweet, something that didn't, they say, come everyone, taste and see that the Lord is good. I started thinking about all these verses and things as I was looking up the history and the traditions involved with communion bread. So this evening, our communion bread is a little different. We have a little bit of flavor, extra flavor into it, but you can feel free to take that out if you want to, or add a little more if you want to as well. So the first one we're going to do is almond flour. And I picked up this almond flour today. It must be almond flour. It cannot be almond meal. Almond meal is basically ground down almonds. It won't work. It has to be the flour that comes from blanched almonds, okay? So the first recipe, thank you. I want to know, and I want to spread that information on. Sweetheart, if you would join me while we put this together. So I'm going to make this bread. The ingredients will be shared with you all on my page and on the Reclamation Project. So if you can help me make this, that would be great. And production team, we may take a little longer than 30 minutes tonight. Just want to let you know. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to use 1 cup of almond flour. You all are going to see how incredibly fast and simple this is. If we could take the overhead shot. So we're going to do a cup of flour. And while he's doing that, I'm going to get my flaxseed ready. We're going to use flaxseed. So not only is this bread gluten-free, but it's also vegan. We're going to use flaxseed in place of egg. So yep, just drop that in there. So we've got a cup of flour. We're going to use a tablespoon of flax meal. Now, we don't even have to, typically you would put this in a bowl by itself and add some water and make an egg-like texture. We're just gonna drop it directly into our bowl. And we're gonna use a 1/2 teaspoon. Actually, let's do a 1/4 teaspoon. That seems like that's a little extra. A 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And then I'm going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of a mixture of garlic powder and onion powder. And then a 1/2 teaspoon of dried herbs. So in here, I have dried rosemary and some dried thyme. All right. So that's that. To this, we are going to add 3 tablespoons of water. If you could do that for me, you're going to see how quickly this comes together. There's 1, 2, and 3. All right. So now I'm just going to use my hand. And mixing it together. And it's simple as that. Now, obviously, this is for communion, so we're not trying to make a whole bunch. Actually, can you just sprinkle a little bit more of the almond flour on here for me? We're not trying to make much. This is not a meal. This is so everyone can have a cracker. Actually, let's do this. I'm just going to add a little more. Okay, and you've seen in the past when I've made things, I've told you all, when it pulls away from the side of the bowl, that's when you know that it is the right consistency and it's ready to go. Okay, so this is ready to go. If you could put that in the sink. I have some parchment paper here that I've already cut. I'm going to put this right in the center. I'm going to cover it with another piece of parchment paper. Then I'm going to, excuse me, take my rolling pin and I'm going to gently roll this till I get it to like maybe about an 1/8 inch thick, so I can make my crackers. Now remember, these are the gluten-free almond meal crackers. So sweetheart, let's talk about communion. What are your earliest memories of communion? My husband grew up in New York in a Haitian Seventh-day Adventist household.
Hebron Church.
Hebron in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's talk about what you remember about communion growing up.
So growing up, I always felt as though communion was like, what was so special about it, you know? Because as kids, I remember back then they would not allow us to take communion.
Oh, wow.
So we would, you know, sit in the pews and, you know, they would make sure the tray passed us.
Oh,
and
wow.
We would wonder why was everyone eating and drinking and we were just stuck there. Not doing anything. So
can I get an overhead shot? Okay, great. You keep talking.
So that was my earliest memory. But I also remember feeling that it was so sacred because, you know, if we were trying to play or something, our parents would say, hey, stop it. Or, you know, you go sit with your family. And you would see everyone huddled around and holding this bread in their hand. And you see the little cups of grape juice. And it was sort of like you wanted to look forward to it because earlier in that process, we, the 13th Sabbath, so we have 4 communions a year. The 13th Sabbath, we would always have to, from our cradle roll or whatever we were in, we would have to do our memory verses. So it was a big day for us. But then we would go and I would go with my father as he was washing other people's feet and people were washing his feet, but no one washed my feet.
Oh, wow.
But later on, as I got older, he allowed me to go wash other people's feet and get my feet washed. But I didn't take communion.
You didn't take communion. Okay.
So he just wanted me to be in the foot service, understanding the service of humility.
Right.
But not yet partaking of because he felt that, you know, you're not baptized, you don't really understand what you're doing. So he doesn't want you to go through you know, you need to understand that it's reverent.
Okay.
You know? So that was a big deal.
Interesting. So we have, okay, well, if we don't have parchment paper, I would say the next best thing would be foil, aluminum foil, but you would need to spray that because the thing about parchment paper is it's really easy. It won't stick. Just because of how it's constructed, it doesn't stick. So if you don't have parchment paper, I would say aluminum foil, but make sure that there's some kind of oil or something on it. So what I'm using for this one, there's 2 different ways you can do this. I have these little like cutters, like cookie cutter things. And you know, you can use these depending on how you want to do your cracker. You can do it you can just do them like that. I'm just gonna do a couple like this. You can use a pizza cutter or a knife and just go like that. The great thing about this is gonna stay right here on this parchment paper. If you could grab me the rectangular, and it's just gonna go right like this into the oven. No wax paper, no. Parchment paper. Parchment paper is, I know that this can go in the oven. I don't think you can use wax paper in the oven, but parchment paper you absolutely can. So this is one of them. And if you could put this in the oven and put it on that's super thin. So let's say 10 to 12 minutes for that one. And then we're gonna get started on the other one. And that oven is at 325. Okay, if you have a nut allergy, then I would suggest you use white flour or wheat flour. That one is specifically if you are gluten-free. I can look up some other ones, but the gluten-free one has nut flour. But I'll look into that, and I'll have some information for you on that. So the next one that we're going to make is the whole wheat flour. This is much more traditional. And so, sweetheart, if you would help me with this, we need a cup of whole wheat flour. You know, it's interesting if you talked about that. I remember when Braxton, my niece, was growing up, she wanted to take part in communion. You know, you feel like you're missing out on something because everybody is doing this thing. You don't quite get it, but what you do get is that you're missing out. And, you know, I had the same experience growing up. And I'm so grateful that as I've gotten older, I kind of did communion just to do communion, but as I got older, I really developed a real reverence and I looked forward to it. And, you know, they would say, you have to, if you have any issues with anybody, before you take, you know, the bread and wine, or bread and grape juice, you need to speak to them or seek that person out during the ordinance of humility and wash their feet. And so I have really, really enjoyed that aspect of communion. And even being married, washing my husband's feet and him washing mine, that really is a beautiful, intimate thing you can share as a married couple.
Yeah, see, the thing that I thought was funny too is while we were teenagers and we would, you know, do things that we knew we should not be doing on Friday nights, but, you know, when it came to communion, we were like, you know, got to get my life right. Knowing that just the night before you did what you were not supposed to do, but
you're telling on yourself.
No, I'm just being honest about it because I think that there are a lot of people that, like, I still didn't get it at that point, is my point. You know, now that I was old enough and I was baptized, you know, I felt as though now I could, you know, it's 13th Sabbath. Oh, let me go to church. Let me do this. Let me do that.
Let me get it right.
Let me get it right. Yeah. But it was sort of like we knew that we could get a pass.
Okay.
So we still didn't get the reverence, the true reverence of it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we've got our cup of whole wheat flour. We're adding our 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And just like with the other recipe, we're going to add a teaspoon of these dried herbs. Pretty much what's left there. And then a 1/2 teaspoon of the mixture of the garlic and the onion powder. Now, with this one in particular, this is kind of a weird, a very particular measurement. You're gonna use just under a 1/3 cup of oil and just under a 1/3 cup of water. So we have our oil here. This is just simple. This is actually olive oil, which, you know, when you think about the Bible days and you think about what oil they used, it was more than likely olive oil. So that's in keeping. So I'm going to use, just under a 1/3 cup of oil. And if you could put that same amount of water in here, that would be great. And this one does not require any flax meal or anything like that. Perfect. And again, with my hand, I'm just going to mix it together. I'll put the rest in there.
So would you say that you mixing it with your hand is somewhat of a ritual, or is it, like, in other words, if somebody wants to do this another way without doing it with their hands, doing it with the hand, do you think that there is some symbolism in that?
I'm sure, because that's what they did, you know, when this all first started. I would say to use your hand because it'll go a lot faster if you could just open this. Now, always remember to keep a little extra flour aside so you can just a little bit in my hand. That's fine, thank you. You don't want it to be too sticky. And you see how this, basically it's pulled, there's nothing on the sides. Okay, so now we're ready. And once again, like we did with the almond flour, we're going to use our parchment and we're going to put it right in the center here. I'm going to put a sheet on top. And sweetheart, if you wouldn't want to, you roll this one out. Not too much weight on it because we don't want to make
And
it
you
too
slowly
thick.
take it till it's like 1/8. Yes.
Now, there's different things you can do. You can make it thin like a cracker, or you can leave it a little thicker like a pita bread. You know, this is basically what pita bread is. It's unleavened flatbread.
And how does one know when it's about 1/8?
You know, when you press it down, you don't want to be able to feel the board right away. The only difference is, so you're probably just about right. The only difference is you don't want, the thinner it is, the faster it's going to bake. So you've got to be careful with that. So that's fine. That's fine. All right. So you see this? Now, traditionally in church, you know, most of the bread is you know, broken up, but then at the front of church they'll always have, you know, the gentlemen or the deacons and the elders that are breaking the pastor, they'll symbolically break it. So you could always leave it like that to do it, or you can score it, and I like to score it a little bit. So again, I'm going through with my pizza cutter. Some of this is very thin, so I'm going to have to watch this. You go through with your pizza cutter or your knife. It doesn't have to be perfect slices. I tend to be a perfectionist with these things, but that's not what's important here. So now that that is done, we're gonna put this on another cookie sheet, and this is gonna go, now this oven is at 425. This is gonna cook in about 9-10 minutes. So if you could pop it in the bottom one is at a different temperature. Great. Does anybody have any questions? I'm going to look into a recipe that does not use nuts at all. I know that tapioca flour is something that can be used. Yeah, tapioca flour is a good one that can be used. It may not have the consistency of a cracker or bread, but we'll figure that one out. But what's great about this is that these are ingredients that are available anywhere. They're very inexpensive, and you can make your crackers. So yeah, you know, the other reason why this really meant a lot to me is I was thinking there's so much going on in the world right now. And, you know, in the morning we have devotion and we talk about, this morning we were talking about, what was the topic of our, this morning, I was really talking about control, how what life really teaches you in your Christian walk is that you don't control anything. And it's really difficult at times to process that because we think that we're in control of things. And so I think for me, reclaiming my connection, reclaiming my faith, reclaiming my health, all of these things it's like I'm getting centered, I'm getting grounded again in what I believe. And I think that's what this quarterly, when you have that communion celebration, that's a lot of what it's about. You asked what herbs I use. So that was dried thyme and dried rosemary. That's what went into both of the breads.
One of the things that we talked about was the two things that we can control are our attitude and our effort. So those are the two things that we can't control. After that, everything else is really not up to us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure any of you that are watching this, you understand that, you know what I'm talking about. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. You're welcome. There's a lot going on. And probably a minute left. And, you know, I'm grateful to be a believer, because in these times, sometimes I wonder, what if I weren't a believer? How would I be coping with everything that's going on? You know, it's a lot, but we have been promised that he would keep us, and he has kept us. Us personally, We have, I was just saying this morning that I'm so grateful. We have been basically, like most of you, at home, trying not to go out much since March. We were living in Atlanta at the time. We packed up our home and moved to Tampa, Florida area in that time. And we've been here again, sheltering. My husband has remained gainfully employed. You know, it's a blessing. We're blessed. We're blessed. We have the luxury of, a few, maybe about another 3 minutes. We have luxuries that people around the world do not have. And there's so much to be grateful for. And I just wanted to share that. Does anybody have anything that they want to share? So take a look at this. This is what the finished product looks like. These are the two different, if I could get an overhead shot, these are the two different. So these small ones here, I did those with a cookie cutter. These are the almond flour, gluten-free almond flour crackers. And they're perfect. This is the perfect size. And then these are the more traditional whole wheat flour communion bread. And you see, I scored them so they're easy to break apart. They are not quite crispy. If you want them crispier and it's something that you have access to, I would suggest you use vegetable shortening. That would make them crispier, but when you use oil, they're gonna continue to be a little soft, which is fine. And did you tasted these yet? I don't know. It's so funny. This evening, earlier today, I was talking to Andre Campbell, Pastor Andre Campbell, and I was talking to him about what I was going to be doing. You can try it. And I kind of felt weird about making communion crackers because it's something that is so incredibly, that tastes traditional, right? Traditional, but with a little something. See, now, I don't know, at your home church, do they make their communion bread or do they buy it?
They made it.
They made it, okay.
And they also, one thing that was different is that I was saying that I've noticed that as we've gotten older, the crackers have gotten smaller.
Mm.
You know, and I know it's not supposed to be a meal or a snack,
but and as I was saying earlier, that I think that you should want more. I think that you should. I remember growing up and eating communion bread and being like, and I know, again, it's not supposed to be something that, you're like, you're looking for a slice of cheese or anything to go along with it. But God is good. Come everyone, taste and see that the Lord is good. So I think that we can improve these crackers just a little bit. The communion bread can be improved a little bit. So I'm going to taste this one. You can taste the rosemary in the thyme.
But you know what would go better with this?
What?
Some grape juice.
Grape juice would be good. Grape juice would be good. So that's that one. And then this is the almond. This is good too. So everyone, thank you for tuning in. We will share these recipes for you. And Melissa, how do you make the almond cracker crunchy? Well, the thinner it is, the crunchier it will be. This one will be crunchy. You just have to watch it because it will burn quickly. I would say that the almond cracker needs to be in the oven no more than like 17 minutes. And you know your oven, so watch your oven, but no more than 17 minutes. But it's good stuff. So thank you, everyone. We'll be back next week with more great recipes where we will reclaim your health. He's coming back with the stuff. Thank you.